a lot of the time radio features in some films as a sort of another character almost within the film, guiding them or something.
This is Stir and Fry Productions, the place where we discuss all things film. And today I am joined by Mr. Will Ridgeon. Hello, sir. How are you doing?
Hello, Tom. I'm good, yeah. And how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for joining us on this pioneering episode.
It feels funny to be the receiver this time.
Well, obviously this episode is about radio and cinema. So, why do you think I've asked you to chat about this topic?
Why am I here? Sure, well, it's a bit of a plug, I guess. Go listen to the Disco Ball Shindig. I have it on whenever. It's on Mixcloud, but it doesn't really have a weekly time. It just comes on usually around the weekend when I've got out to do. So we just, I suppose, used to be in the actual part of Forge, but it's now a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit of a lone ranger at the moment. Just doing it from wherever I can. Sometimes in the basement, the living room, wherever I feel the music takes me.
Yeah, so we'll have a link to that in the description. We're actually going to listen to a short clip of your radio show now, if that's all right.
Take it away.
The Shindig musical reel rolls on. This is Shindig.
Sunshine on sound. Disco in the dark. Whilst the day ends, the beat goes on. You're in the disco ball. Why, hi there, Shindiggers, dedicators to the dance, devotees to disco. You're with me, Shindig, in the disco ball.
So, Will, do you find it hard to hear your own voice? Because it's something people often say, isn't it, that they find it so awkward hearing their voice recorded.
Do I find it awkward to hear my own voice? You know, I think at the very beginning I wouldn't listen to them. Yeah, there was, I remember it was me and a few others that would do some shows on Forge, and you'd do it in one go. You'd go to the studio, and it was really nice because the studios there are pretty plush actually. It's a nice view over Sheffield, and you felt very relaxed. And at the time, you'd feel like you were absolutely spitballing great stuff. Just, you know, all sorts of weird sort of alliteration coming through just before playing a tune. Something to set. You think, oh, I sound pretty edgy. But then once you've done it and you'd recorded it, you're just like, nah, let's leave that now. That's all done. I've given myself the weird artificial ego boost of putting myself onto a radio host sort of show and sending it off, and then I'd leave it, and I wouldn't dare go back and listen to them. But I didn't even put them onto Mixcloud for ages. I just leave them sort of for that time every week, see if anyone else tuned in. But no, I wouldn't. And then I think more recently, when it's just been like, you know, admittedly stuck in your room, I'd be editing them almost a bit too much these days. It's definitely been a bit of a drag and a lie with how much effort I'd put into them, especially over lockdown number uno. I'd end up taking way too much time over it, just wanting to get more and more stuck into some I don't know, niche effects or something. I got very heavily down the software game, I suppose, just playing around with loads and loads of funky effects on the voice.
And we got a taste of that there, didn't we? The kind of, you like doing your kind of pans from left to right and your little echoes, and it's great. It's very out there, isn't it?
I was having all sorts of fun, thinking this is like discovering a mellotron, or this is the discovery of sound, as though I'd just become some sort of pioneer in radio. But it was just my first time being like, oh, these have effects on them, all these dials and things. But, you know, I'd never had the chance to just play with them, so that was what the studio let me do anyway.
It was like a kid let loose in a candy shop.
It was a bit, and then you'd end up really mucking it up for the next person who would realise they had like one ear full of bass and everything else and one ear full of like someone else's microphone. it totally muck it up for someone. So you did have to sort of put them back. You try to anyway.
So bringing it to cinema a bit, I guess I've got a little pop quiz for you, actually.
Okay.
Well, with one question.
Cool.
So if you were to take a guess at which decade was America's highest feature film output, so like in which decade was America releasing the highest number of feature films per year, what would you go for?
I'm gonna go with the 70s.
Good guess. That's what I thought. It's actually the 20s, which is very surprising, isn't it?
Yeah, that's miles ago.
Yeah, 800 feature films a year. And nowadays, even in non-COVID times, they'd be lucky if it's over 500 a year. But it kind of made me think, because I was looking at kind of the history of cinema and the history of radio, and it seems they kind of grew up at the same time. So both were kind of invented in like the 1890s, and then both kind of started to become popular in the 20s. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on if that was a coincidence or not.
The interesting thing is that the idea that radio was for a long time before TV, and the idea that like a radio show would literally be your main source of entertainment.
Yeah, and I guess also radio and cinema kind of always kind of plugged each other, didn't they? I think film criticism on radio has always been quite a big thing, like go and see this movie. And also, radios have always featured in films, I guess, as kind of...
Yeah, actually, I love it when radios feature in films. Of course, The Boat That Rocked.
Yeah.
Is my fave, but actually even got... It was even my Christmas present about Radio Caroline. Yeah, there's things like the Blues Brothers, and the idea that like radio is somehow meant to. A lot of the time, radio features in some films as a sort of another character almost within the film, guiding them or something. Vanishing Point, such a weirdly like good use of radio in a totally unusual way. They funnily have gone hand in hand. It's a nice thought. Both sort of all about broadcasting yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think of kind of the classic intro to a sci-fi movie as you hear in the background a radio saying something weird is going on with like some sheep in a field or something, and it turns out to be relevant to the story. But kind of providing exposition, I guess. Yeah,
there's that sort of layer that you're a bit out of control with a radio. You're just on the receiving end. You can't do anything to it. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and then it all goes silent.
That's fascinating. So it's quite one way, but yet radio presenters, it kind of feels like they're having a conversation with you, doesn't it? That's kind of the scale of it, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that must be that is the appeal for it, isn't it? You're tuning into something where you can sort of feel a sort of tangible connection. I love, tuning into things. Particularly now, I think it's definitely a go-to source for like almost a one-on-one, but it is just you listening to them or them alone, but there's sort of a connection there between you two. That you're both on sort of different ends, connected by a thin slither of little waves that are coming in.
Joined across the airwaves. Yeah,
it's a bit of a romantic, perception of radio, isn't it? Just some sort of tiny little wave coming to connect you with someone else. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was trying to think of some other films that kind of did this quite well, and I think one I mentioned to you before was the start of La La Land is done very well, isn't it? Because the way the first musical number is kind of introduced is the camera tracks past all these cars with their radios playing, and then we happen to tune in on the one that's like playing the start of the first song. Did you have any
magical.
other? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, did you have any other kind of favourite uses of radio in film? You mentioned Vanishing Point.
Yeah, I love Good Morning Vietnam. That is a tasty movie. Have you seen Good Morning Vietnam?
I haven't. No.
Oh, okay. So, well, in which case I won't spoil it too much, especially for anyone. But of course, it is based around a radio host in Vietnam. Robin Williams plays him, and it's that same idea that he's the radio host that will be there to look after the troops, as it were, almost. But it's very comical as well, and very sort of political as well. So where radio can and can't, what it can and can't say, what it can and can't do. So there's always someone who's trying to toe the line with you, and kind of radio has become a bit of a I think I'd say it's a bit of a bad boy medium. It almost sometimes it's had its days of like the BBC censoring songs, but of course, who wants to censor a song? A song will be made. If someone censors a song, there's going to be another song about it, about censoring that song. That'll have even more stuff to be censored. It will just spiral. In my mind anyway. That it's a rebellion in some way. So, who wouldn't want to be part of a radio show that like plays the most out there tune of the day, especially like in the 60s? Who knew what sort of references people were trying to sneak in apparently.
Yeah, and the other film that just came to mind again was American Beauty. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not.
But yeah, there's a key moment in that where it's kind of pouring with rain, and Annette Bening's character is in a car listening to the radio, and it's this kind of inspirational, quite vicious message, and it just kind of speaks into her situation in that moment, and it's kind of a very crucial moment in the film. So I guess there's also that kind of call to action element of radio, isn't there?
When I'm on the radio, I'm talking to you.
Yeah, this is actually a thing we explored, isn't it, in a short film we made recently called Fight or Flight. So I made this in lockdown, filmed myself, and you kindly offered your radio services as the radio presenter in the background. So we've got a short clip of that.
My top tip for you today is, drum roll please, put yourself outside of your comfort zone. Now I know, hands up, it's a bit crazy, but go on, I know you want to. Carry a briefcase in your non-dominant hand, wear a bandana, or I don't know, skip work altogether, and run up and down the stairs 1,000 times.
So there we go. Yeah, what's your reaction to seeing that again?
Yeah, it has been a while. I remember doing that a couple of times, and I was just thinking, how will this sound from... It is funny, you're trying to think, how will this sound from someone who's never heard it before, where I'm sort of having a couple goes at it. I've now heard it a load of times.
Yeah, absolutely. And we it took us a while to focus on the voice for you to do. We tried the very kind of posh... British, classic British broadcasting voice.
Yeah, what would you like to do with your Sunday morning?
Absolutely, like yeah, little demonstration. That's great. And then what was the other one? Was a kind of late night radio show, like really close to the mic, kind of.
Yeah. Hey, listeners, what are we gonna do this time, huh? What songs are we gonna play for you? What are you gonna do? Run up the stairs 1,000 times? Something crazy.
Yeah, and there was an American version as well, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You don't have to do that if you don't
Cheers.
want
No. But this is the thing. When I started, I was like, you know what I'm going to be? I'm going to try and be like the guy from Boat That Rocked. One of the reasons why I didn't listen back to myself, because I would have heard it just so much more. It's just me. But it's funny where you try and put yourself. When you're there with a microphone, you feel like there's a bit of acting maybe you've got to get going with, a bit of performance to jolly it up.
And yeah, something that struck me was when I was editing it, in order to make it sound like it was definitely coming from a radio, I cut out the high and low frequencies. But actually, a lot of modern radios are pretty clear now, aren't they? It doesn't sound as kind of, as low bandwidth as that.
I quite enjoy the low bandwidth. It's always a bit of fun to just try and like hear what you'd sound like. You almost think it almost sounds more radio like if it sounds more clunky and funky.
Absolutely. And I guess the film was kind of meant to be perhaps how someone in the 50s imagined the future, so that the design of the radio is it was actually a Bluetooth speaker I bought, but it looks like an old radio. There's this kind of trend, isn't there, of making things feel vintage, and people are getting record players now and using old cameras, and you're a big fan of this, aren't you?
Guilty as charged. Yeah. I'm the same. I definitely buy into the nostalgia feel for radio and records. If it's tangible, physical things being wired up to speakers, love it.
Oh, and there's this word, I keep forgetting it, but it's like, you know how mobile phone cameras, when you take a photo, it has the shutter sound effect? Anachronism, maybe.
He loves a good acronym.
Or skeuomorphism. Yes, I think that's it. Skeuomorphism is a term most often used in graphical user interface design to describe interface objects that mimic their real-world counterparts in how they appear. Okay. And a well-known example is the recycle bin icon used for discarding files. That's so true, isn't it? On Macs, when you put something in the trash, it goes... Yeah, and so it's this kind of nostalgia, and I was wondering, sort of thinking about kind of the future of radio. Podcasts have kind of taken a huge... they've really grown a lot, haven't they, during this time? I know Louis Theroux brought out a podcast, Grounded with Louis Theroux, and my brother's grown his podcast quite a lot during this time, and was it Meghan and Harry did one as well, and yeah.
You list it, everyone.
Everyone's doing a podcast. Yeah.
Tom, you're doing a podcast.
I mean, this kind of is a podcast with just some added bells and whistles, but yeah. Yeah, do you think that's kind of very much following in the radio tradition?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. What I'd say is they're very like reminiscent of stage plays and old things like, The Archers. Possibly, could you even call that the original podcast? I know it's not one person talking to you, but it's no music really apart from the soundtrack. I guess it's trying to replicate sort of people in conversation a lot of the time, and I guess that was kind of a little bit before podcasts. So maybe it's come from that, and I mean, even in like things like Radio 3 and 4, you'll get stuff that's still similar to podcasts, but maybe there has been definitely there's been a desire to just have someone talk about a subject, almost like an audiobook, but get into someone else's life instead of just fiction. Things like Louis Theroux's, like, who doesn't? It's a great extension of his videos or like his programs. Especially, just I think he must be so like inundated with people telling him that what he's saying on that is so interesting, and you probably wouldn't be able to fit all of everything that he said onto a TV schedule. So it just creates such a great platform for them to be able to just spiel off everything that they've wanted to talk about. But, maybe not being able to get the platform on TV for. I think it's great.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, you get the kind of extended edition, don't you, of each person. I think I know someone who listens to a podcast where it's basically talking at dinner. Interesting.
Yeah, it's we're really getting into the almost the ASMR vibes. The very like mundane day-to-day things and sounds. Yeah, maybe it goes back to that radio's form of connection. We get something out of it that, I mean, when you think about it, it's a little bit funky. Like they have no idea who's hearing it, and they don't know who you are, but actually, they're doing it for you as the audience.
And actually, I wonder if it's partly because we've seen so many movies, we can actually kind of join the dots. Because I did this little competition a while back where you had to make a film with just sound, and kind of have a story reason for why you couldn't see anything. So I did a story about a guy who was stuck in the boot of a car, and I just remember thinking in that, it's amazing what you can do with sound. I mean, with just sound effects, I was able to suggest that, you know, the car was starting to move and it was going past a restaurant and some people cheering, and then it was stopping at some traffic lights. So I wonder if when you listen to a podcast and you hear that, you get that kind of very fly on the wall type thing where people record like them pouring themselves a glass of water and stuff. We're so used to these sound effects from movies and stuff that we can kind of join the dots and like it feels like we're there almost.
Yeah, definitely. I remember listening to he was a guy just walking his dog, and you're of course, I mean, I'm making myself a cup of tea, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm watching this guy with his dog, and I can almost remember like the image of that. I was just listening to him, so the power of the mind. Goodness me.
And I always remember this Derren Brown thing that they talked about it on the Kermode and Mayo's film review, but it was Derren Brown can tell you what like quality street chocolate you're eating just from the sound of it. So like you take a bite out of it and he'll be like, that's the long gold finger.
It's not the sound, not the smell, but the crunch, the noise. What was it? It's not the taste, not the smell, but the crunch, the noise. That's a Ratatouille quote there.
So it might just be worth mentioning to any viewers / listeners, how do we know each other?
Yeah, how do we know each other? Yes, Tom, we have known each other for a very long time. Tom and I, and probably about 15 years, I'd say.
Yeah, go back a while. We used to live opposite each other, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah, we did. Yeah, and actually, speaking of radio, now there's something for you. We used to try and shout from each other's rooms, or even I don't know if we ever tried to do the old yogurt pot to string. It was always in the mind, like, can we set up some sort of yogurt pot walkie-talkie between each other's houses, like some sort of radio line?
Yeah. So Will, if people want to get into radio, what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess at the moment it's, I was going to say it's tricky, but actually at the same time it's prime time. Everyone's sort of indoors. We're all kind of a captive audience, I suppose. What I'd say is just go ahead, use your laptop mic or something from your phone. Everything seems to have a mic these days. Actually, the best one is, just even that one on the headphones. That it's simple enough. And if you have something to say, if you have something that you think other people should hear, and even just some music that you think, this is boss. I remember when I started, I was just like, I like 60s music. I think people could enjoy this too. If I talk about it, maybe I can explain it somehow. So, just anything really. It's an open airwave. It's an open field, and I suppose at the moment it's particularly quite nice to hear people, coming across. It's like a phone call sometimes. Just tuning in when you want to. So if you want to do it, I'd say, yeah, there's going to be someone out there who will be interested to hear what you've got to say. So, go for it.
Fantastic, and obviously learn from the masters. We'll put a link to your radio show in the description.
Yeah, I feel like I'm some sort of I've barely done 30 shows or something,
But no, it's a great show, and you've had guests on your show as well, haven't you? You had Kate to talk about French.
Yeah, actually, I'd say that anyone who's feeling it's tricky to keep a spiel going, just having someone else there is always great. You got double the minds. Just have someone like what we're doing, just on a phone call, and then just use them as like a someone to jump off from. I really enjoyed having Kate on the show. That was a great time. Actually, that was great because it was all to do with international music, and I hadn't even thought about that. And then I was like, yeah, let's because Kate's been away, let's do some songs that she likes, and they'll be in French. It was a nice special.
Well, Will, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom on radio.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it, man. It's nice to I suppose do a bit of a behind the scenes.
Okay, well, thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this interview and you'd like to see more like it, give us a cheeky subscribe. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.